What's up, everyone? Just checking in to see if anyone has any last minute questions for paper 2 of the English exam, which is tomorrow for a lot of you for your English trials. So this is a very spontaneous one. I mentioned last night that I would try and jump on if I got an opportunity, just for anyone out there who is keen to ask some questions, who happens to see the live stream going on. So I will be here just for a little bit. I know a lot of you are probably studying, hopefully revising, going over things for tomorrow. But if you have any quick questions, anything you're not sure about, now is the time to ask while I am in here. We didn't put out any kind of notification for this one. I just mentioned it briefly yesterday. So for anyone who happens to see that we are live right now, that's awesome. You have a chance to ask some questions. Ideally, about the exam tomorrow, as I'm sure most of you are probably in that situation, but maybe you have paper two later on if you're doing your exams next week, for example. But if you're rewatching this later, if you're about to do the HSE or you're just watching this randomly because you've got an assessment or something, that's awesome as well. So let's see if we've got any questions. Hey, Brody, thanks for joining. Is it Aaron? I guess Aaron. Haven't seen that spelling before. Sorry if I'm saying it wrong. Unsure about Mod C. Help. What aren't you sure about Mod C? In terms of Module C, the craft of writing, you've got to have some kind of draft composition, hopefully. It depends what situation you're in. Tell me what you have so far, and I can tell you what I would do in that situation the night before, right? But if it's mainly that you're worried about the stimulus and not knowing how to adapt to that, I can give you a couple of quick tips on it. But let me know what position you're in and what you're actually worried about, because given that it is tomorrow and you might only be staying up for another hour or so, there's no point trying to do anything drastic at this point. It's just having the right kind of mindset. Yes, and of course, thank you for the good luck message. Of course, good luck to you all. But right now, if anyone is worried about anything in particular, you shouldn't be stressing too much at this point, but happy to answer any specific questions. Again, make them specific, because if I start going on about everything you should have done for Module C, you're probably all going to freak out if you haven't done one of those things, because it's tomorrow for a lot of you. So best to just have very specific questions about scenarios. That's what I'm looking for. And we'll break those down. Lots of other videos on the channel about other specific things for each section. In terms of how to adapt to a Module C stimulus, I use LIFE as an acronym, okay? I go in there and I think I'm going to make the stimulus work for me. I want to interpret the stimulus in the most favorable way for me. I'm not just going to see the stimulus and think, oh, I have to write something completely new that's not based on anything I've prepared. That's the wrong mindset. I never think this stimulus doesn't work for what I wanted to say. I always think, even if it sounds delusional, this is a great stimulus. Now, how do I make it work for me? That's my mindset, and I use LIFE to interpret the stimulus in the broadest possible way to make it work. So what is LIFE? I think about, can I interpret this stimulus literally? Can I literally use the stimulus as it is to work for what I want to explore in my discursive, imaginative, or persuasive? Okay. Then I think, what about the I in LIFE? Internalize. Should I internalize the stimulus? Should the stimulus represent the internal thoughts and feelings of my character or of my speaker? Because maybe it's not convenient for you to interpret the stimulus literally. That's okay if you can't interpret it literally. You can internalize it and make it be symbolic. It's symbolic for how you feel, how you're thinking, okay? You need to be creative in that way. So that's called internalizing it, where the stimulus reflects the internal workings of a character or speaker in your piece. That will make it more versatile. The F in LIFE is figurative. So that means, can I interpret this figuratively? Can it be a metaphor? I'm looking at the stimulus, I don't like it, but hang on, if I interpret it symbolically, if it's figurative, maybe I can make it a bit of a metaphor for what I want to talk about. And now you don't have to use it literally. It just becomes this motif. It becomes a simile maybe at the start. You say, I felt like I was floating in space. Imagine you got a picture of space. You say, I felt like I was floating in space. Now you don't have to actually be in space. You just feel like it. Or, I felt like I was being pulled towards the sun about to melt, if it's a really like high tension, high stress experience. And then E is externalize. Externalize. That means the stimulus is no longer something inside your character. It's actually on the outside. For instance, if you get a quote that you don't like, you think, oh, my character wouldn't say that quote that's in the stimulus. Then you think, well, someone else might have said it, and maybe they're hearing it, or maybe they're thinking about what someone else told them. So the stimulus could be something outside of your character or speaker. It's something they saw, something they heard, something they're remembering. That allows you to play with the stimulus in probably a more convenient way. Now, you don't have to use all of those things from life, but life is what I would be thinking of straight away when you see the stimulus. Think, okay, remember what Johnny said? Think about it. I need to give life to the stimulus. Should I interpret this literally? Maybe I should interpret it figuratively using the F. Maybe I should use a simile and say, I felt like this, and then the marker sees straight away how you are figuratively, metaphorically linking your piece to the stimulus. And you need to do it repeatedly. So I always say use the rule of threes, the rule of threes, okay? The rule of threes means that in at least 3 moments in your craft of writing piece, you need to have substantially engaged directly with the stimulus. And again, you can use life to do it. It can be metaphorical. It doesn't have to be literal. But I would in 3 different parts, I would have at least 3 sentences in that zone, including in the opening of the piece, always in the opening to show the marker you are engaging with it. And at least 3 sentences each time. So you end up with at least 9 sentences, if we're being mathematical about it, that are engaging with the stimulus. I would honestly try and do a lot more. That's just like a bare minimum kind of guideline, because the last thing you want to do is have 1 sentence at the very start of the piece that kind of literally incorporates what the stimulus said, and then you just forget about it and go on and do something else. You need to constantly engage. So remember the rule of threes. There's at least 3 sections where you are really digging into that stimulus and relating it in a way that is convenient for you. And that's going to allow you to have a much better kind of result, because you're actually engaging with the question and the stimulus. I'll come back to some of these other questions. I'm just going to stay on paper 2 here for a second. I actually pulled up an example, if you want me to just show you an example. Let's see if I can get, if I look at paper 2 here. Yeah, let's look at last year's HSC together for a second. See if I can share this. Okay, so HSC last year, first of all, you'll notice that it was a 20-mark question. So be prepared to do a 20-mark response and not have a reflection. Sometimes, very often, you get a split between a composition and a reflection, but there have been a couple of HSCs where they've just given a 20 marker for a response without a reflection. Okay, so be prepared for both scenarios, which means you kind of got to have an extended version of your composition. And for those of you who think, yeah, I have something I could do a 20-mark response with, not to say you think you'll get 20 out of 20, but you might say, look, I have something that I feel would be enough for a full 20 marker. Great. Make sure you have a cutoff point earlier in case you get a 10 marker or a 12 marker. Okay, you've got to have a shorter version in mind. You've got to have a cutoff, and you've got to know that it still makes sense to kind of finish at an earlier point, or maybe you're going to start later. You just need to know what your extended version would look like and what your shorter version would look like for a Module C draft if you're adapting it. Now, this was a discursive or persuasive. So notice it did not give you the imaginative option. So this is the advanced one here, okay? So you won't necessarily get an option between all 3. So again, if you're on here last minute, you're thinking, I'm banking on there being a discursive, or I'm banking on there being an imaginative, just turn your mind to the possibility of being forced to do something else. Because even if you've just considered it tonight, just for 20 minutes, think, if I had to do an imaginative, how could I kind of use at least what I was talking about in this discursive in the context of an imaginative. Like, okay, I'll have a character. Who's the protagonist? Maybe they're the same person as your speaker. Where could I just set this up so it's very simple? Just have thought about like some basic setting, how you'd open the piece. Try and use things from your discursive and the same ideas, but just have thought about how you might characterize that your speaker a little bit more. Set them somewhere where it's clear that you actually have an imaginative piece, so there's a clear set in, as opposed to a discursive where there might not be a set in. Couple of elements like that could make a huge difference. If you just dot point some of those for a worst case scenario where you get forced to do one specific text type, like an imaginative, discursive, or persuasive, then that could save you a lot of marks. If you've got a discursive and you get asked to do a persuasive, you can maintain a lot of it. You can maintain a lot of a discursive. You just make it more argumentative. You just make the tone more definitive. You change the modality. It becomes high modality. You'll never, instead of perhaps, and you're like contemplating things casually, conversationally, you're actually going to start being a lot more definitive about it. Use a bit more repetition, rhetorical questions, speak directly to the reader. A couple of tonal stylistic shifts there will actually kind of do most of the job for you if you're converting from a discursive to a persuasive. So again, think about that a little bit. Now, other parts of the question. Before you even read the stimulus, always look at what the question is. So craft a discursive or persuasive that incorporates the ideas in the stimulus. Okay, what ideas? You are the judge of what the ideas in the stimulus are. Like, is there some kind of limit? Yes, like it has to be feasible, but there's no one interpretation. This is why you have to use life. This is why you have to interpret it broadly. You have to be flexible and creative with what you do with the ideas of the stimulus. You determine what the ideas of the stimulus are, and that way you can make it work for you so you can still preserve a lot of the stuff that you've prepared, which is great. Would you rather go in with stuff that you've prepared, which is really sophisticated and refined and you've worked on and you've thought about, or do you want to just write something from scratch because you couldn't be bothered to think a little bit outside the box about how that stimulus could have worked for what you wanted to say? Maybe it wasn't immediately obvious, but it could have worked if you had thought about life, if you had thought figuratively, symbolically, rather than literally. You can't think too narrow about the stimulus, okay? And you don't need to memorize your Mod C, but I always like having some kind of draft, a memorized draft, to give me the confidence of some really good material that I've worked on over time, versus knowing I have to go in and just make something up. Unless you've practiced a lot in terms of your general writing skills and you've done lots of scenarios and you feel really confident coming up with things on the spot, which is like 1% of people who can pull that off. You should have something, a base, some plan, some examples of your writing where you've used the prescribed text in some way in terms of how you've written it. Of course, you should have something prepared. So again, if you're watching this and you have nothing prepared, just think about a few things you could do and make sure you are at least using, I would say, two stylistic features, like maybe it's an anecdote, maybe it's a type of imagery, maybe it's the narrative voice, something that was in your prescribed text, one of your prescribed texts. Because if you get asked to do a reflection, you will have to account for those things and say, I deliberately, right, I intentionally use an anecdote because I was inspired by my prescribed text, and you have to say what that is. Now, let me just finish on this example here with this Mod C stimulus. So a few thoughts here. Okay, remember, you've got a nice broad question or instruction that just says incorporates. It doesn't say begins with, it just says incorporates the ideas. It couldn't be vaguer. The only tricky thing for someone who was unprepared would be having to do a discursive or persuasive if you relied on doing an imaginative, and we've already talked about that. You've got to consider those scenarios. Now, here it says, for all the benefits gained by time-saving inventions, there's much to be said for going back to basics. So, could there be benefits to leading a life less convenient? Right, so it's like, immediately we're thinking of a trade-off, like a tension, and we like tensions because that gives you something interesting to talk about, and your draft pieces for Mod C should always be about attention anyway. So let's say you had done like a draft, and by the way, let's do an exercise together. Let's do an exercise together to make this interactive. Okay, I'll get back to some of these tips for essays and stuff, but Mod C is the first thing we're ticking off here. Okay, then we can move on from it. Can some of you guys throw out some concepts or some ideas that you are planning on exploring in your piece? So, like, give me the one-liner of what your piece is about. It's about a chef who works in a kitchen who does this. Give me that one-liner, and I want to brainstorm with you how you could interpret this stimulus to make it work for your idea. So don't come up with random ideas now. Like, don't even worry about what the stimulus is. Tell me what you guys would like to write about. If you're allowed to write about anything for Module C, what would the one-line idea be? What would you be writing about? I'm writing about the struggle to write a creative writing piece. Maybe that is your topic. Maybe it's one of those meta-fictional ones where you're reflecting on the nature of writing. Okay, we'll deal with that. Again, just tell me what you guys have prepared or what you would like to write about, and then we'll think about how you can adapt it to this stimulus. Don't worry about what this stimulus actually is yet. Just tell me what you have. So, and the idea is like, if you want to go in with a draft or you want to go and write about a particular topic, my point is that you can. Okay, you can. You just have to think broadly about the stimulus. Whereas if you're going in a more kind of pure sense, where you're saying, I'm just going to look at the stimulus, see what comes to my mind, and write something in response, that's amazing as well. If you have practiced doing that, that's amazing. That's like kind of the intention of it. But because it's so time constrained, it's really hard to execute that with a high level of sophistication. So it's often good to have some materials prepared as well. So I'm not saying you have to have something memorized and you just go in with that. I'm saying if you have something prepared or a topic you really want to explore and you practiced writing creatively with it, let's try use that, because it's probably going to be better quality because you've worked on it. But again, you don't have to do that. But let's say you do it. We've got parental expectations. Tim Tam says, hey, I was writing about parental expectations. Well, how can we relate parental expectations to this stimulus? For all benefits gained by time-saving inventions, there's much to be said for going back to basics with parenting, right? Parental expectations. So could there be benefits to leading a life less convenient? Well, with parental expectations, maybe the back to basics was let kids do whatever they want to do, right? Like let kids be free, roam wild. And then in modern day society, parents have become really strict and they've become super conservative in terms of what their kids are allowed to do and see. So you can see there, I'm just thinking about a tension between a back to basics, which you get to define. That's the amazing thing about this. You take it where you want to go. If I'm thinking about the parental expectations generally, then I'd be thinking about, okay, how can I relate parental expectations to back to basics or a more convenient thing? I would be thinking, well, parenting, you could do a back to basics where you let your kids be free, or you could be stricter and do a more modern approach, which is more convenient, it seems. It's more convenient, time-saving inventions. Hey, kids, have this device. Stay at home and play on your iPad. But is that the best thing for them? Maybe they should go out and be free in the wild and face some risks within reason, right? So you talk about that tension there. Time-saving inventions, you can talk about chucking kids on iPads instead of them playing out in the streets, back to basics. Okay, that one. I think we've covered that one. That would be a cool one to do. Okay, Sam, Power of Simplicity, with a man bird watching and an introspective voice reflecting on how it is good sometimes to keep life simple. Well, yeah, you're already responding to this stimulus. So that works. A man's bird watching is reflecting on how it's good to keep it simple. Just make sure you have some kind of contrast. I would want to have some contrast here to refer to kind of the time-saving inventions. Now, you get to take that wherever you like. What would be the opposite of bird watching, out in nature? Maybe it's watching a YouTube video about birds. And it's like, well, sometimes you can watch videos or content, time-saving things, because it's time-saving to just look at it on YouTube, because then you don't have to go outside and wait for a bird to fly by. You just watch a video of a bird flying, right? So if it's making sense, you can use the time-saving thing in any way. You talk about, again, like digital media and how you could still see these things, but is it the same as in person? And then I think you can do some really good stuff with the imagery that you wouldn't get watching something, on a laptop or on a YouTube video. You're not going to get all the senses. You're not going to get the smells of the fresh air. The visuals are going to be different. The sounds, you can really lean into the sensory imagery on that to highlight the contrast. Hey, by the way, in terms of this stimulus, you don't have to agree with it. It just says there could be benefits to leading a life less convenient. You can do a piece about someone who doesn't lead a life less convenient, and who's they're basically a cyborg, and they do everything at maximal convenience, and that's their life, and it's this like crazy frantic life, and you track the mindset. It's good to do stream of consciousness potentially for this particular stimulus, because you could actually show someone who's so like addicted and embedded in technology and hedonistic pleasures. They're just every impulse they have, they are feeding. And it's like, this is convenient. There's food there. Like Uber Eats. Basically the world we live in now is just everything is so convenient. You don't have to show the other side. You could actually do a piece that incorporates the ideas in the opposite way, where you're kind of satirizing. You're satirizing the alternative, where you're saying, no, it's good. Just lean into every convenience. Uber Eats, Netflix, do nothing. Don't work out. Don't do anything that's tricky. Just message friends on Facebook. Don't see them in person. Show that extreme and show the stream of consciousness, and maybe the person's super frantic and they're actually miserable. So you could go that way with it as well. Hey, good to see you again. I saw your comment before on the other video. You said something like you got cooked by the first paper. So what happened there? Give me some context. I don't know if you responded on the comment yet. Would I say it's better to memorize a discursive piece to adapt to imaginative and reflection, or do the opposite? Well, I mean, I always start with my preferred text type. So if you really want to do an imaginative and you've got something prepared for that, then learn that or familiarize yourself with it. You don't need to memorize it word for word, especially this close to the exam if you're doing it tomorrow. I would first of all just learn the thing that I want to write the most, if it's a clear-cut like decision. If you're on the fence between imaginative and discursive, I find discursive is a better middle one, because it adapts so well to a persuasive. If you ask it to a persuasive, discursive to a persuasive, and vice versa are good ones. Imaginative is different, because you've got a kind of a characterization, and you've got a setting that has to be there for it to really be a believable imaginative. There doesn't need to be a whole lot of plot or action going on, but discursive and persuasive are kind of in one group for me, and the imaginative's the other. There's no way of getting around at least considering what an alternative opening would be to your piece if you had to do an imaginative and you had planned a discursive. You have to consider it, and I would even write like a mock introduction for the imaginative, even if you were banking on the discursive, to make sure you've got that set in, that context, that premise there, and you're familiar with altering your style in that way, while still preserving a lot of the ideas and even a lot of the prepared material from the discursive. You'll still be able to use it at times, but you have to add more imagery, more description, a little bit of action, some setting, right? There are some core elements there that I would definitely practice, using. Uber Air, good to see you back as well. Is Tyler here? I'm not sure. Hope you all went well today, though, if you did the exam. Molly's on. Johnny from Jettle is here. Absolutely. Good to see you. Is a base discursive about love a good idea? From John. I mean, why not? I mean, like, base discursive about love, but what are you actually writing about? I mean, a couple follow-up questions would be, what do you want to say about love? How are you representing it? That love is not like a concept, or you need to have a thesis in any piece. There needs to be a thesis, even in an imaginative. Like, what are you exploring? What concern are you representing? You have to represent something that it has a bit of a tension to it. There has to be a complexity. This is for everyone. Make sure you've got a complexity. You can't just, I'm writing about someone who loves someone. There's no complexity there. Like, love has complexity, right? Love isn't simple. when in the real world, right? Because love itself might be pure, but then once you start putting it in different contexts, and people might love someone and they feel conflicted, and they don't love them back. There's lots of complications with love, so you need to be more specific with what you actually want to say about it. Is the first point. Otherwise, it's going to sound vague, and yeah, it's not really enough for me to say, is that a good idea? Is writing about something specific to do with love a good idea? Sure. Make sure you can at least connect it back to something in your prescribed text. And it's more about how you're writing. It's about the style. Module C is about how you write. It's not as much about what you write, okay? What you write, yes, has to address the stimulus, and it should be connected in some way to some kind of concern or tension that mirrors the text or is linked to a text that you studied, just to ensure against questions that ask you to use something from a prescribed text in Module C. They're less common, but possible. So worst case scenario, good to have it. But it's more about the stylistic features. So how are you writing about love? It's not about what you're writing about, it's about how you're writing about love. If you want to write about someone who is consumed by love, how are you going to show that? And a good way to show it, if you're just kind of daydreaming all the time, you're in love, you're in love with someone for the first time, or just deeply in love at first sight, maybe your sentences are really, really long because you're in this like kind of trance, you see? So if someone's entranced by someone else, they're in love with them, long sentences that drag out and mirror this kind of tranced state of the person versus short sentences. Then I did this, then this happened. That's going to better reflect that emotional state. So use sentence lengths and paragraph lengths to reflect what you're trying to say. I'm trying to say that this person's in love. Okay, give me long sentences that are kind of romantic in nature. That's a good way of showing that. Okay, so sentence structures and lengths, have some really short sentences, have some really long sentences. Use them as and when appropriate. But that can set you apart more than what you're actually writing about. Don't feed into your hedonistic pleasures. Maybe you are right now because you're on YouTube and you're watching this. At least this is somewhat constructive. But if you're in a position where you really need to be learning your base materials, please jump off the live stream now and do that. That would make me happier. As good as it is to see you all here. I'm really here for any last quick questions, or if you've kind of checked out of studying. But don't push yourselves. You should really jump off. It should be telling you all to hop off the live stream and go and study. But hopefully this can provide some assistance with how you can approach the questions tomorrow. All right. Questions. For those doing T.S. Eliot, let me go up to Eliot. We'll come back to this one. But for T.S. Eliot, is 2 poems enough? Yeah, 2 poems is enough, but you need to be prepared for a situation where you get asked about another poem, a specific poem. So I would have materials on all 5 poems. I would have, if you want to have 2, that's fine. I always recommend 3. But I know there are some teachers, some schools who say 2 is fine, and 2 can do well. You just have, I would still try to have 3 paragraphs, and you can talk about 1 poem in each paragraph and then merge the 2 in the third one. Still want to have 3 paragraphs, but I would do 1 poem per paragraph. Personally, I would do 3 poems, and you can still refer to the other 4 poems, 4 and 5 at times. I would just have 1 to focus on so that you're getting that depth and you're not just jumping between 1 poem and another. But yeah, 1 primary poem per body paragraph would be my advice. If you're going to go with 2 or even 3, make sure you've got a couple of quotes memorized from the other poems that you're not planning on using, along with a key idea that you know that poem is about, just in case the question provides a stimulus, an extract from one of those other poems that you weren't planning on using. So then you have some more evidence to use in a paragraph, and you can add that in so that you are genuinely using that as one of your texts if you're asked to. Because with T.S. Eliot and other question and other kind of sets of poetry like that, a module B question could specify one specific text and say, using that text, that poem and other poems, answer this question. So in case you get asked about a specific poem as part of your answer, it doesn't have to be your whole answer, but as part of it, have those back up 2 to 3 quotes, up to 3. If this close to tomorrow, I'll just worry about memorizing 2 quotes per poem for the ones you're not planning on using, just in case, and know where you would slot them into your argument. Where would they replace in your existing draft or plan? Okay, where would you put them, and what are the quotes, and what was the idea? They're kind of the 3 things. Just quickly on the discursive point, any idea is really fine. Like technology, as long as there's attention, as long as you're exploring attention, and you can, make sure you're thinking broadly about how you can connect it to the stimulus or how the stimulus can work for you. Yeah, technology makes you more disconnected. Absolutely. Again, if it's kind of like a cliche topic where it's like, oh, people will use technology too much, the way you differentiate yourself there, like this topic's fine. I think you could do a lot of cool stuff with this topic, but you've got to make sure you're differentiating yourself with the way you write. It's the style of writing, not what you're writing about. Okay. So again, if you're going to say technology makes you more connected at times, alter your writing style when you're talking about that. If you switch over in your discursive to, oh, but it can also make you disconnected, maybe you disconnect the bits of text to reflect the disconnection. You know what I'm saying? Like the paragraphs are completely fragmented. You see the style, the sentence structure, the way you talk about a disconnection because of technology could literally be represented by your disconnected paragraph. And there's like spaces and it's all these like single things. And the marker's going to read and be like, oh, something refreshing, something new. You're talking about disconnection, and me reading this, I feel disconnected to this thing. You've got like a line there and then a line there, and there's like one short sentence there. But then with the connection, maybe it feels really kind of smooth and it talks directly to the reader. So you're connecting with the reader when talking about how technology makes you feel connected. See how I'm suggesting things stylistically that match up thematically with the piece. That's what you want to achieve. The style matches the theme. So if I was going to suggest that, I was going to debate or contemplate in a discursive that technology can make you more connected, then I would literally connect a lot more in those paragraphs with the reader. I would say, I'm sure you have felt like you've been able to, connect via technology. You wouldn't actually say it like that, but you would use the word you, right? You would use the word you and your and we and our, right? Our experience. We have the same experience. We can connect with people far and wide. It's amazing what technology is doing on the one hand, and then you go to your like disconnected paragraphs, but on the other hand you can feel super disconnected and dun, 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 dun. So that stylistic change up is going to impress the marker more than the topic. It's not so much about the topic. Okay. Hope that makes sense. Hey, this is good. This is great to see. Look at this. Rosetta, the videos helped me ace short answers today. That's the positive news. I'm glad you aced it. And I'm glad you found it helpful. You finished with time to spare. That's super rare. So well done. You've crushed that. Please do the same tomorrow. Keep it up. Tyler, welcome back. Good to see you again. They could ask for specific Eliot poems. They usually would only specify one if they were going to, and that means you have to mention that one, substantially. So ideally a paragraph on that one, or a couple of pieces of evidence at least in a paragraph, maybe in conjunction with another poem if you only knew a couple of quotes. But you still would have other paragraphs, the other paragraphs you planned, on other poems. You still use other poems. You just have to at least have some substantial analysis up to a paragraph on that poem. And usually if you get asked about a specific poem, it comes with an extract from the poem. So you've got some material to work with from the extract that you can refer to. And you can even refer to it in other paragraphs besides the main paragraph where you were talking about it. You could link in bits from the extract in the other 2 paragraphs. So at least somewhere in each of your 3 body paragraphs, you've touched that poem via the extract that you were provided. So use the extract to your advantage in that respect. Okay, so let's just see if there's anything else here worth going over before I just talk about this question. All right, I'm going to break down this question in a second for Mod B, just give you some thoughts. It's a nice general question, so I'm going to tell you the key words that I'd be identifying and looking for here. So bear with me. We break it up with a little novelty question, a little bit of fun night before the exam. Who do I support in the Prem, NBA, or NRL? Prem. Okay, so not a big Premier League fan, so I don't watch it, but get around it. I went to a World Cup in Rio once, which was awesome. NBA, I'm just a LeBron fan, so Lakers at the moment. If he moves, I move. Hate it or love it. NRL, Newcastle Knights all the way. All right, so let's get into question 2 here. So this is the Module B question, and I'm just going to go through again. I want to get you guys in the mindset for quickly unpacking a question and thinking about what the key terms are and what to do with them, okay? So evaluate how the artistry and integrity of your prescribed text has influenced your understanding of its literary value. Okay, this was a pretty broad Module B question, broader than most, to be honest. Module B, especially for advanced, is usually where they get super specific into the text. Like they can ask you about a very specific element, usually to do with form, how it's been written, how it's been composed. But in this case, a very rubric-based question. All of these terms, literary value, artistry, integrity, textual integrity, that's all in the Module B rubric for advanced, right? So what are the key words here? Evaluate how the artistry. What is artistry? I'd highlight artistry in my head. Integrity, number 2, has influenced your understanding of its literary value. So there's a clear three key terms in this question. And I never want to really focus on more than 3 key terms, because then you start trying to do everything at once and you end up repeating the question, or you do a pretty poor job at dealing with each word. So if you focus on more than 3, sometimes I just like to reduce it to 2. 2 key terms in a question, it gets really tricky. So 2 to 3 key terms I'm always looking for. If you think there are 5 key terms in a question, there are not. You're just overvaluing some of those terms. Some of them are going to be more important than others. Figure out which ones are really the crux of the question. Here, artistry and integrity are being used together to refer to 2 different aspects of form, right? Form with the text, and how has it influenced your understanding of its literary value? So why is the text valuable, and how has it been written in an effective way, okay? So artistry is to do with form, how it's been written. If you're doing T.S. Eliot, fragmentation is the big kind of hallmark feature of Eliot's modernist poetry, right? Its artistry is in the way it's been written in this fragmented style, generally speaking. There are lots of specific elements to that, but if I'm just giving you one example from Eliot, I would be thinking of fragmentation. The artistry is in the fragmented style, which is a modernist feature. And then in terms of the integrity of it, you need to separate those 2 terms. Never group key terms together that are grouped in the question. That's something you should all remember going into tomorrow. Nowhere in my essay would I ever say artistry and integrity. I would never group them together like that, because it's your job to expand on them and relate them together. So when I'm thinking about the artistry of, say, T.S. Eliot, I'm thinking about the fact that his kind of artistic use of fragmentation, right, creates a sense of integrity. Now, why does it create integrity? What is integrity? It means that the way it's being written is reflecting what it's writing about. So it links to the themes, right? Everything ties together is what integrity means. So we talk about fragmentation, and we say how helps reflect the modernist concerns, right, of Eliot's modernist concerns to do with spiritual alienation in the wake of rapid industrialization, for instance. So he's got these concerns. He's going to reflect it through the artistry of his fragmented style. Notice I just said through the modernist artistry of his fragmented style. I'm thinking about how I can expand on that word every time I use it so that I'm differentiating myself from everyone else who's just going to repeat the word artistry. Do I want to use the word artistry? Yes. Do I only want to use the word artistry? No. Do you want to use a synonym for artistry? No. I want to use the exact word, but I want to do more than that. So what did I just say? Let's see if I can remember. Eliot's modernist artistry, or I don't even know what I said down before. It sounded good though, and I've forgotten. So the point is, put something before the artistry. It's the artistry of. It's Eliot's modernist kind of artistry. I guess that does make sense. Modernist, that's the adjective I'm using next to it because that's context. Eliot's modernist, or innovative, poetic. Give some form there. Poetic artistry, or in terms of his fragmented style, Eliot's innovative artistry, which derives from his fragmented style. Then we've dealt with the artistry bit in that sentence, if I was doing that as like a thesis or somewhere in the intro. And then we would say, helps reflect, right, if we hadn't said modernist concerns, of the spiritual alienation during this period of rapid industrialization, thereby contributing to the textual integrity of his poetry as a whole, right? The fact that the style allows him to reflect the concerns is what contributes to the integrity, right? Contributes to its textual integrity, and thus enhances its literary value across time. Now, when you talk about literary value, you need to say what the literary value is. It's literary value as a collection of poetry that continues to what? Like, why does it have value? I'm just giving you ways of brainstorming how you could expand on each of these key terms to avoid just repeating them. But it's literary value as a collection of poetry that does something, right? What does it continue to do? That continues. What's its literary value? That continues to illuminate the necessity of existential purpose for humanity. We have to always have purpose. If you lose purpose, bad things happen. Okay, that's a message we can take away over time, even though he wrote within a very specific context. So in periods of contextual change where humanity's kind of sense of purpose, man's sense of purpose is challenged, that's dangerous because people need spiritual meaning. When there's a kind of breakdown of values, when there is a breakdown or a disintegration of cultural values, then that's when problems arise because people lose their sense of purpose. They lose the moral frameworks by which to live, against which to kind of weigh up their lives. And that's the literary value. So just there, we've kind of thought through each thing, and that would help you frame your general argument. Hopefully you can weave in what you already had from a scaffold or a draft into that framework. But make sure you understand that a word like artistry is to do with form. That's why you have to have things in your introduction and throughout the essay that is to do with the style, how it's been written, the style of the text, the fact that it is a poem. What type of poem? Are there sonnets? What's the style overall? There's a fragmented style. It's fragmentary. Why is it fragmented? And then it's to reflect a certain idea. It's to reflect the fragmented psyche of the modern man. So there's a fragmented psyche. There's a fragmented style that reflects a fragmented psyche. So the form reflects the theme, and that contributes to the textual integrity of Eliot's work, which thereby possesses an enduring literary value as a constant reminder of the need for spiritual purpose. Full stop. Thesis done. Band 6, here we come. Okay, so that's how we can think about breaking down a question. Okay, that was just like an example, but that's how I would think about it. I identified the 3 key words. I thought about how I wanted to define each one. Artistry is form. It's how it's been written. I'm going to focus on the overall thing, which is like fragmentation. If someone's doing like Artist of the Floating World, you're thinking about it. Obviously, it's a prose fiction novel, but the artistry might come from the subjectivity of the unreliable first-person narration. Okay, so the artistry, the artistic, and by the way, be flexible with the keyword. Don't every time think you have to say artistry, because it might not work grammatically in the sentence. So you might want to say artistic instead of artistry, right? Artistic use of. Just engage with the derivative of that word, and that will do the job at responding to it, as long as you're expanding. So, you might say for Artist of the Floating World, that's a prose fiction novel that uses an unreliable first-person narration, and it has non-linear structure. You could say the artistry of the novels, or you could say the artistic use, Ishiguro's artistic use of a non-linear structure or of an unreliable first-person narration allows him to reflect this, which gives it textual integrity, and that ultimately is what heightens its literary value over time. Okay, so we're connecting all the key terms that way. We're not grouping them together. That's how you can deal with that question. Quick check-in on the chat here. I haven't been looking at the comments. All right. What about Mod A? What about Mod A? Module A. Module A is typically, especially for advanced. This is. If there are a lot of standard students in here, just let me know. I'm not trying to neglect standard here. Just I know kind of most students on these streams tend to be advanced, but actually that might be an even split here. Yeah, I can do a standard question. Give me a second. Module A for advanced tends to be the most broad in terms of its scope. Like, look at this. To what extent has your perspective of the earlier text determined your interpretation and appreciation of the later text? Could you get a more general question than that? It doesn't even give you an extract. Sometimes it will give you an extract from each text or one of the texts to go with this very broad statement. But most Module A questions for textual conversations are to do with the value, the usefulness, the significance of studying the two texts together. How did the earlier text help shape your understanding of the later text, or vice versa? Usually, you're talking about how studying the earlier text framed your understanding of the later text, but ultimately how the later text can actually transform your interpretation of the earlier text as well. There's a reciprocal, symbiotic relationship there, and you need to make sure you acknowledge that. The beauty of this question is that you can control the narrative in terms of the ideas. It doesn't say anything about any specific ideas. If it gave you an extract, then you could take out an idea from that worked for you. And then you could say the extract reveals this idea, but then you need to talk about how the texts look at the idea differently because of their context, and then talk about how that creates a value of a textual conversation because you understand the context better, but it also changes your understanding of each text. So the best students are going to constantly come back to why the textual conversation was important. Why does it have value? Because it transforms your understanding, because it enlightens you with new understandings of each text that you didn't previously see. So that unlock to new meaning, that unlock to contextual insights and nuances that you wouldn't have previously understood, that's what you need to tap into for a Module B advanced, Module A advanced question rather. Introductions, link sentences are super useful in Module A advanced for tying things back, bringing things back to the value of the textual conversation. You're not just exploring the themes in each text, you're talking about what is happening by studying them together. What's the difference, and what does that illuminate about how studying two texts together can be useful? Okay, don't forget to zoom out. My final advice here before I move on to the next thing, because this is such a vague question, there's nothing really else to be said. You can control the narrative with the ideas, constantly bring it back, to what the value of the conversation is. And you can use explicit language like this enhances the textual conversation, or Shakespeare's dialogue, intertextual dialogue with Atwood facilitates this, or it helps transform our understanding, or it shapes our foundational knowledge or a foundational understanding of imprisonment that is then transformed, or that is then subverted, that is then expanded by Margaret Atwood's Hagseed. So talk about how your understanding is changing. Do it in the link sentences as well as the introduction and the conclusion. Obviously, topic sentences, you can use language like, I like to use language from Module A textual conversation one, like Shakespeare instigates or begins the textual conversation or provokes Atwood by doing this, by representing this, and he represents a certain idea this way. Atwood responds to Shakespeare intertextually by reimagining this to reflect this aspect of a context which is dissonant or different. Okay, so that's what I've got to say about Mod A. Expect a kind of textual conversation heavy question that might be super vague, but you could also get a theme in there, or you could get extracts that you have to look at and you think, well, what is the theme from those extracts that I really want to take away from it? Make sure you refer to the extract. You can say, as illustrated by the extract in the introduction, and address it specifically. I've got a YouTube video on that. You can just look up how to deal with an extract question, and it has an example from Module A. But what are we looking at here? Let's go back to English Standard. Here we go. Module A. Okay, these ones were text-specific questions. They tend to all have the same style. So they're all going to focus on the text and then some idea. They might all have exactly the same. Yeah, they do have the same question, actually. So slightly different. Family and its connection to culture. Place and its connection to culture. Change and its connection to culture. Okay, so they've chosen something a bit more relevant to each text for this one. So how does your study of Small Island inform your understanding of place and its connection to culture? So they just kind of figured out something quite general here. But you're just talking about the text in relation to place. So you need to obviously say, what is the, not just significance of place, what place are we talking about with this text? And by the way, I realize Small Island, that is a really uncommon text. So that's a horrible example for all of you, isn't it? Maybe it's a fair one because none of you are probably doing it, but let's go with this one. It's the same question. How does your study of this inform your understanding of place and its connection to culture? Almost always in a Module A standard question, there is the word, at least one of the words, culture, identity, or language, right? In this case, it's really focused on culture. What you need to think about is what type of culture, what type. Notice the key words are clearly place and culture, and you need to talk about the relationship between it. But what is the culture and how does it relate to a sense of place? Okay, what is the culture? You need to have very specific wording around that. You can't just say, oh, the culture. You have to say, is it Indigenous Australian culture? Is it what is it in this case? I mean, we've got Henry Lawson short stories. Is it the traditional kind of culture of the Australian outback? Are you exploring the hardships of that? Its connection to the kind of harsh conditions of that rural environment in terms of place. Depends what the short stories are about overall, of course, but you need to kind of think about that. I'm just thinking about like the drover's wife or something as an example, but you've got this very kind of brutal environment where people have to fend for themselves. That's the place. And then how does that connect to the culture of hardworking Australians who had to do it tough in those environments? That's what you need to dig into, and you need to try and contextualize that very specifically. What are the cultural values specific to that time is what I would be thinking, right? And be specific. What are the specific cultural values? Are they values of hard work? The underdog, all of these things that are kind of pertinent across the stories you would have to dig into and then connect that to how that relates to the environment, the sense of place, Is it harsh conditions, etc.? Use very specific language around those two things, and obviously talk about how they're connected. But break them down. Don't just repeat these words. You have to say what the cultural values are. What are those significant things you want to talk about in your essay in relation to culture? What is the culture? And what is the actual place we're talking about? Do people feel connected to their place? Do they feel like they are being challenged by their environment, etc.? All right. The advice I gave earlier on Module B is similar for advanced, is similar for the close study. Let's have a look here. Literature does not just describe our world, it shapes and enriches our understanding of it. To what extent does your prescribed text reflect the ideas about literature in this statement? Super broad one in this case. You can expect to see some more specific terms than that on average. But literature does not just describe our world, it shapes and enriches our understanding of it. Yeah, so the important thing about this question is that it's a to what extent question, which means you kind of need to, you can either explicitly or implicitly agree and or disagree with it. I tend to not like to say, to what extent, to a significant extent. I don't really like to say that language because it's a bit too in your face. It's good to be clear, as I always say, use the actual key terms of the question, but I don't mean these key terms. That's just a to what extent. That's the type of question. The key words in this one is literature does not just describe our world, it shapes and enriches our understanding of it. So the one key word in this question, for those who are trying to test themselves and thinking, what would be the key word? It's literature, the value of literature. Then it gives different takes on it. It doesn't just describe our world, it shapes and enriches our understanding of it. Usually with a question like this, it's obvious whether you should agree or disagree with it. Sometimes in a harder Module B question for advanced, it actually gives you a statement where it's testing your ability to disagree at least partially with it. So the better students will disagree. But in this case, this is something you'd almost always want to just agree with. And so you go with it, but you need to be specific. Literature, and you're pulling your Module B example, what type of literature is the specific text, right? Is it a prose fiction? Is it prose fiction literature? Is it literature? Is it a cinematic work, right? A piece of literature, cinematic piece of literature. You need to link the form to the type of literature so that you can expand on literature in that way, because literature is just anything that's been created in the literary field, so it's really to do with the form as well. Now, you would say that through that type of literature, by using a cinematic form of literature, the film is able to transcend a mere description of what type of world. Notice it says our world. This is your opportunity to define and break down these things. So many students just take it for granted and just repeat this bit, our world. What world? Be specific to the text. Maybe if you're doing, say, Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, maybe it's a neurodiverse world, our neurodiverse world. See this little gap here between the word our and world? That's where you slot in the adjective. That's where you set yourself apart from everyone else, because you don't just keep writing every word here in your sentence. What a waste of a first sentence if you were to literally repeat this. Guess what? There's a decent percentage of students who would get a statement like this and they just repeat it as their first sentence. And then the second sentence is only when they start to actually break it down. If you do that, if you found that you do that, remember this and cross it out heavily or just enough and start from the second sentence. Let your second sentence be your first sentence. These warm-up sentences are so dangerous because the marker's already thinking, students just repeated the question. This is like a band 4 student, band 4. Very hard to get band 5 at that point if you're literally starting your essay with a statement that is repeating the statement in the question. You've done nothing to answer the question. So use those gaps there. Describes our neurodiverse world. It does not just describe our neurodiverse world. Prose fiction pieces of literature do not always simply describe our neurodiverse world, but they can in fact. Now, do I want to use shape and enrich? I would probably Again, I don't like to group keywords like this together. If a question says shapes and enriches, I never use those two words together. I never double up like that because you're just repeating the question. The more words you bunch together, the more you've just repeated the question. So I like to just pick the important ones out and expand on them. So even there, I just pick one that I think is the most relevant. I would say, prose fiction, pieces of literature do not simply or do not just describe the neurodiversity of our world, but rather it can enrich our understanding of, it can enrich our emotional understanding. Notice what I just did there. I said a few too many words in a row from the question statement. So we pulled it back and we said, hang on, what type of understanding? You can always ask what type, and then you put the adjective in before the word. So it shapes and enriches our emotional understanding of individuals who can in fact offer more to the world than we expect. Okay? It's not just saying our understanding of it. It's our understanding of how individuals can offer more to the world than we expect. You've got to elaborate. There's like all these hidden gaps here that you are meant to fill. That's what you're being tested on. Okay. So make sure you do that, especially in your thesis and introduction. You're filling in the gaps between all of the key words there. And again, I would probably just strongly agree with this, and it would be obvious that you're agreeing with it through that statement. You don't need to say, therefore, I agree to a large extent. You don't need to say it like that. Even just with the example I just provided, it's implied. All right, just pausing for a second. So that's just some help there on how you could. Well, it's a reminder to all of you that when you see words from a statement like this, to always try and add parts before and after to elaborate, expand, so that you're answering the question in a meaningful way. The way that you're going to be meaningful and effective is to be specific. The way that you're going to be specific is to unpack those key words and add parts before and after them wherever you can, to add more and more insight, to connect it to the text and your argument. What form is the Truman Show? What type of thing? Like, is it how you said it's fragmented structure for T.S. Eliot? The Truman Show is highly meta-cinematic. Okay? Truman Show. Triple D, if you're still here. Truman Show equals meta-cinematic. The form of it, it's a film. You watched it. It's a film. That's the form. It's a film, but it's a meta-cinematic. It's got a meta-cinematic form because it's a film about a film. Truman is being stuck within a show, a TV show, and you're watching a film. You are watching a movie, or you never say movie. You're watching a film about a character who's stuck in a film. So there's two layers of film to that. So that's called meta. So it's meta cinematic, and that is like that's the piece that's equivalent to Eliot's fragmented style. Does that make sense? Triple D? I assume so. Is the Truman Show an actual prescribed text? Yes, for standard. Oh, this is a good question for all of you, standard or advanced. So let me just rest this somewhere else. I think I've been through those. Actually, I'll go. Yeah, let's go back to advanced for a second. I'm going to answer this question. This is a really important one. No, we've done that. Okay. So what would you recommend with the timing? Do the exam chronologically. Yes, do the exam chronologically. For everyone watching right now, thank goodness you watched this in case you were going to decide to do something crazy and do module C first or something like that, okay? You always leave module C to the end because module C is the most forgiving when it comes to length. So if you write a shorter module C piece, you can still get full marks. It can still be a high quality response. Whereas if you have to shorten your essay and you don't have a conclusion and you only get halfway through a paragraph, that's going to massively impact your final mark. Okay, maybe the conclusion's the least important part, but you have to have one. It's just one of those things. Even a student today emailed me. Excuse me. Student today emailed me, and they said, "Oh, felt like I did really well, but I only just got to the end. I had to finish halfway through my last ETA sentence, their last sentence of analysis in their third body paragraph, and." In reality, they shouldn't have bothered starting that sentence of analysis, and instead they should have just had a ready to go, short, punchy concluding sentence to put as the conclusion, one sentence to just say ultimately, 1984 reflects this connected to the question. Great. It's still a finished essay that way. And even if you pulled up one sentence of analysis short and you didn't have a link sentence in your last body, that stuff just doesn't matter as much as having that completion, that sense of completion to the essay. So you really do want to at least have a one sentence conclusion, ideally two. It feels more completed, although I would never prioritize the second conclusion sentence over another sentence of analysis. So I think at the very least, you need to get one sentence as a conclusion. So if you've kept your eye on the clock tomorrow and you're doing the paper in order as you should, you get to end of module A. Oh, I'm at 50 minutes. Okay, stop where you are in your analysis, finish that sentence, do your one sentence conclusion sentence that includes the words of the question, and move on. Even at 45 minutes, you should do that, obviously. At 45, you kind of have to pull yourself up and be like, I have to stop, do my one sentence conclusion. So I've finished it. Okay, 48 minutes. You're only meant to spend, sorry, I'm saying 45, 48. Like this is assuming you're way over. You're only meant to spend 40 minutes, right? So you should actually be doing these checks around the 40-minute mark. When you get to 40 minutes, it's time to do that final conclusion sentence. I want to be clear about that, not 45 or whatever. But if you're really pushing it and you took it to 45, you have to wrap up there, do the last conclusion sentence, prioritize that over anything else you were going to write. And then you go to module B. Say you spend up to 45 minutes on that accidentally because you only really want to do 40 minutes, which is why you should only have a 32-minute draft for module B. That's why we have all of that preparation stuff that I've been talking about for months if you've been tuning in, but I know a lot of you are probably just tuning in more recently as we get to crunch time, fully get it. So let's say your essay is not, all of you should know how long your essay is, hopefully. Like how long does it take you to write a draft out? It's worth even just cutting out some chunks now if you feel like it's way over. You're just going to go better tomorrow because of it. Otherwise, you're going to live in denial until the moment and then realize you've only got 20 minutes to spare for the final section. But having said that, the best module to end up with only 20, 25 minutes on is module C, because you could do a 10, 15-minute imaginative and still get 12 out of 12 if it was a good quality and it responded to the stimulus. So quality over quantity for the craft of writing piece. You don't really want to be in a situation where you've only got 20 minutes for your module C because you took 50 minutes on each of the essays. You really do need to be disciplined. This is why I harp on every live stream about timing your essays and cutting them down so that you don't get in these bad spots. But if you are tomorrow, it's a hard question, you can't think, you're a bit slower to remember things or write, I get it. You want to be finishing on module C so that you could do a shorter piece, still finish. It's still finished. You only spent 15 minutes on it. You should have maybe spent 25 or whatever, but at least you got it done. So you want to make sure that you're doing module C at the end. That's funny. Let's see what else we got here. A lot of Nessa hate going on. I guess, crunch time before the exams. No one's liking Nessa. Look, can you get marked down if your conclusion is only one sentence? I used to get away with it quite a lot. I'd always plan for two sentences. I would always time my essays down to around 32 minutes, 33 minutes, and there would be a two-sentence conclusion. So in my best case scenario, when I was doing my essay drafts, I only had two sentences for the conclusion. I never did more than that. In many cases, I had to do just one longer sentence for the conclusion. Got 20 out of 20 a lot of the time for those. Not saying that to toot my own horn, but just to tell you that you can get full marks in it. One sentence conclusion. I would always aim for two, because I feel like two gives you, you can kind of sum up your argument in relation to the question. What have you just proven? And then the second sentence of the conclusion, I always like to finish on like, what's the takeaway for the reader? Like what's the lesson that we're left with to reflect on? How is the audience challenged to go forward now and rethink something? So it's like, what's the takeaway? Because that's different from an introduction where you're introducing the concepts. The conclusion is like, what are we walking away with? What was the final lesson for the reader? So if you use that as a focus, you'll avoid repeating your introduction, because now you're thinking the audience is encouraged to, boom, think differently about this. And that's different to introducing your ideas in the introduction. So often people think, oh, my conclusion is just repeating my introduction. That's because you're not thinking about it the right way. You're not thinking about what is the audience or reader challenged to walk away with. I mean, walk away, don't actually say that figuratively, obviously. But what are you meant to take away out of this whole study? Well, we're challenged to reevaluate how we treat others. To give you a very basic example, we're challenged to reevaluate our conceptions of the modern world, and maybe to reconsider the need for a return to traditional values. I'm making up stuff that could relate to different things, but that's how you can distinguish the conclusion from the introduction. And you only need two sentences max to do that effectively. So guys, don't overrate the conclusion. I'm just saying you have to have one to be in contention for a 20 out of 20, 19 out of 20. You will get marked down if you don't have a conclusion. Probably not by a ton, but it's enough to hurt, and it's easily avoidable if you just keep your eye on the clock and make sure in that last minute that you're going to spend on it, you choose to do it for the conclusion instead of the other sentence that you were on. I'm just catching up on some questions here. Just going to pick the ones that will probably help all of you the most. Just quickly, with a lot of Elliott questions. So if they specify a specific poem for Eliot, can you use three poems, integrate that third specified poem within the two other ideas? Yeah, if you only had two ideas, you talked about two poems, just make sure you have enough evidence for each of those ideas on the specified poem. It doesn't have to make up your whole essay. It doesn't have to be even a whole paragraph in that situation. Tie it into both. Ideally, have a couple of backup quotes on hand for each of the poems in Eliot, so you've got something to draw upon in addition to an extract that they would provide in most situations where they specify a poem like that. So that's fine to integrate it. Otherwise, what I would typically do is I have three body paragraphs, one poem in each one, and I would know in advance where the other two poems that I haven't planned for, but are prepared for, but I haven't put them in my essay draft. I would know where they best substitute into that essay structure. Like which ideas do they best kind of complement in terms of the other poems, and then I would substitute them in. Maybe I can still refer to the other poem as well, but I've got a couple of solid pieces of evidence in the bank for that new poem that they've specified. Yeah, Jedi. How can I go past Jedi as a commenter when Jedi is one of our marking tools on Jedl.com. So Jedi, good way to get my attention. In paper one today, I ran out of time. Only had one sentence conclusion. Well, at least you got a one sentence conclusion. As I said, I got 20 out of 20 many times when I had to rush into a one sentence conclusion. So you might not lose any marks. If you didn't have a conclusion, you would have lost maybe a couple of marks. So for everyone tomorrow, you can save a couple of marks just by stopping a little bit earlier, a minute earlier, on your body paragraph that you're on. Finish the sentence. Look up. Okay, I've got to just force myself now to do a conclusion. And you write that. You have that one sentence conclusion ready to go as fast as you can. Keep writing until they say pens down and tell you to, hey, put your pen down. Right? If you're at that point, get that concluding sentence down, and it's gonna be worth it because it gives you the completeness to the structure. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Don't assume you've lost any marks on that. Right. Ideally, go for 2. Just depends on the quality of the conclusion as well. If it was rushed and didn't make sense, it's a different story. Uh, what? Why am I the only person doing all of this? What do you mean? What do you mean by that? I just like coming on here and helping out. But do you mean why am I the only person from Jedl doing this, or I don't know? Are there other people doing live streams? There's probably other people trying to do it, but you know, try to put my own spin on things. But yeah, I'm here just because I like helping you guys out. Um, the Jedalites, that's nice. I haven't called it Jedalites before. I usually say Jedlers, but Jedalites I kind of like. I mean, sounds like it almost sounds like biblical in a way, and I don't want to go in that direction necessarily. Jedlers is good as well. Um, is it fine if both my critiques for Mod B challenge my personal opinions? Yeah, that can be really advanced actually. You mean critics like a critic? Just in case you're going to say critical in there, with a C versus a Q, because you're presenting your opinion is your essay. Your whole essay for Module B is your opinion, or is meant to be. And you don't want a critic or a critical reading to dominate your essay. So they really don't want to see that. They want it to feel like it's coming from you, even if it's informed by a critic. You don't want it to sound like that. So when you refer to a critic, if you're going to say, however, or whilst this critic says this, and then you go on to say your interpretation, that's great. That's actually really strong. It's showing that you're considering. It's not only showing that you're considering critics in terms of informing your understanding, and you should only do this in your body paragraphs, by the way. Don't mention any critics for Mod B in your introduction, and you don't have to use critics, by the way, for everyone who's hearing this freaking out. Oh, I don't have a critic. You don't have to have a critic. You don't have to have critical quotes. It's good to have some kind of obvious critical references in the sense of like, hey, a psychoanalytic interpretation, feminist lens, or post-colonial reading. Like you can have general terms like that show you've engaged with different critical theories. But again, like a word like feminist, postmodern, those terms actually show that you're engaging with literary theory and critical theory. Now, if you are going to mention a specific critic and you say, whilst this critic says this, and you give a very short quote, it should be a very short quote, don't let it dominate the sentence, then you provide your interpretation. It's showing you've considered it, and you're also able to think for yourself a bit and say, actually, I don't agree with that one. This is my take on it. Fantastic. That can be really good. Can be tricky to execute, but if you've kind of framed it the right way there, in a couple of paragraphs, one sentence in each one, then that's great. Dank, I'm assuming you're You haven't done the common mod yet. How long should your common mod essay be? 32 to 34 minutes when you write it out. Whatever that word count is for you is what it should be. So make sure you cut it down if it's longer than that. Trying to follow the trail here on the chat. Sorry if there's like follow-up questions, because then I don't know what they're in relation to. Might be missing some. I'm going to look for the super practical ones, given that it's 9:30 now. I don't want to keep you guys up when it's important to get your sleep. 3 to 4 sentence conclusion is probably excessive. Yes, I wouldn't. That's prioritizing the conclusion too much. I'd focus more on just. I'd honestly, if I was you and had 3 to 4 sentences, I'd just shave off 2 right now and just know the 2 sentences that I want to write, and don't add more in elsewhere. Just free up a little bit more time, a couple of minutes, to help you adapt to the question better and answer the question better. Quality over quantity when you get to that level. So yeah, 2 sentence max for conclusion is what I always say. That's it. Triple D, that's it. Max 2 sentences for your conclusions. What should I do if I don't have the necessary vocabulary to adapt to the new question? My mind is stretched so thin, making it harder to interpret the question as well. I fully get that. Like, you have to do the best you can. Okay. Sometimes when I show examples, first of all, I've got a little bit more time to think about it, especially if it's like a properly or higher quality video that's been edited and planned out. But even now, if I'm showing you examples and talking, and you're thinking, I might not have thought of that word or vocabulary, you have to do the best you can do. As long as you have the right mindset and you're at least attempting to expand on key terms and break them down, even if the vocab's not as high quality. If you are breaking down the word and answering the question, that's still way better than just repeating the question. So, your vocabulary is what it is at this point. But if you can direct your mind and attention on the day to just think, hey, I just have to add something. It doesn't have to be crazy good. It doesn't have to be a super sophisticated word. Simple is often better anyway. Even if it was, and feel free to throw out an example. If I can catch it in the chat, I'll address it. But, you got a key term like artistry. Just say, the artistry of the text as a film. Like, okay, it's a film. That's all that's the artistry. It's a film. Say something that expands on the question, on the keyword of the question, that makes sense to you, and just say it in as sophisticated language as you can, even if that's not that sophisticated. It's still better than repeating the question or ignoring the question. Okay. So I hope that helps. I mean, I wish I could magically, give you a trick to have a broader vocabulary, because having a broader vocabulary is an advantage, massive advantage. But it doesn't mean you can't do well if your vocabulary is more limited. You just have to think a bit harder and make sure you're at least expanding in some way and just wording that the best you can. Okay, but still making that effort to answer the question by expanding on it, thinking of an adjective. Say all you can think of is positive instead of a word like benevolent or something, right? You have to go with that at the end of the day. It's still better than not doing it. So do the best you can with the vocab you have. There's and try and use the prepared materials that you have as well, because hopefully you've had time to prepare some things that have better vocabulary than you naturally might have, because you've researched and got feedback, and you've said, I've got some nice words in here. You've learned those words, use those. That's one tip I can give you, is maximize what you have in terms of all your prepared materials and drafts. Because a lot of the time when I would do drafts, right, I would discover all this new vocabulary in the drafting periods. And from there, I would then put those into drafts, learn how to use them, and then I would recycle them in the exam and use them as much as I could. And I was using what was in the draft as best I could because I knew that was my best material. I wouldn't necessarily come up with those things on the spot. So try and use anything you've prepared as much as you can because that's probably your best material, even if it's not a fully memorized draft. Do you need quotes from your prescribed text in Module C? I would know some quotes, at least kind of at the very least 2 quotes, but ideally 4, 4 very short quotes that provide evidence that you could use in a reflection so that if you got asked to reflect on how you've used the prescribed Module C text, and then you say, hey, I've used an extended metaphor in Module C. I used an extended metaphor. Let's see if this paper, by the way, has the reflection. I don't know if this one did actually. Oh yeah. So justify. See this one? Justify how the stylistic choices you have made, demonstrate the hope, make detailed reference to your writing. Okay, to be fair, this one did not ask for anything in the prescribed text. Interesting. Okay, so this example is one where you would have gotten away with it. But there are other questions, other examples where it actually said make with reference to your prescribed text. And you could have quotes to show an example of how they used an extended metaphor, and then you quote how you used an extended metaphor. But just a couple of quotes is fine. This is last minute, so maybe get 2 quotes, one to show one very short quote that literally just refers to an extended metaphor or whatever it is, and then one short quote that refers to something else. And then you could refer to that and have a little textual reference to address, how you were inspired by that use. But you could get a question that doesn't require you to do it as well, but you may as well have a couple there as backup. Hey, can I tell you guys something? Don't worry anymore about common module. Let's worry about marks lost and gained later on. Okay, right now you need to get your head in the game. Once a paper is done, it's done, and you have to just forget about it. I get afterwards you reflect on it, dwell on it. You might have thought it went well. 2 hours later, you realize it didn't go as well, or vice versa. Just forget about it. Don't worry. You did the best you could. It's done. Take away what you learned from that for tomorrow, right? So I only wrote 2 body paragraphs, 6 quotes. If that's all you could write, then that's all you could do. But going into tomorrow, maybe you could have done you could have planned your time out a bit better. Maybe you had to have a slightly shorter introduction to get a little bit more evidence in there. So try and add one quote to each paragraph tomorrow. Do 8 quotes, if you're feeling kind of strapped for time. So just make a little incremental improvement. That's your takeaway from today. Don't dwell on it. Don't worry about marks lost. Impossible to say. You might have had a really high quality argument and responded to the question well. So you can make up for a lot of those marks anyway. Just quickly, for anyone who doesn't have paper 1 or paper 2 tomorrow, would you recommend someone who struggles memorizing to still do short answers first? Yes, you always do short answers first. Have a read of the earlier comments from today. So I saw a couple of people who didn't do it. They might have followed my advice or seen some of the recent content on it, but you always do that paper in order. I'm sure everyone today, you guys tell me, who didn't do it first, who did? Do you regret it? I just saw some people say before they didn't have time to do the last couple of questions because they did the essay first. So you always maximize reading time. It's got nothing to do with memorizing or anything like that. Don't worry. Once you start on it, you think you're It's not going to make a difference whether you put off the essay for 50 minutes or not. You either know it or you don't, and that 50 minutes time of doing something else before you do the essay is not going to make a big difference there. And by the way, you've got 4 days to memorize that thing really well. So just figure out how you best learn it and do your best there so you feel more confident. I keep forgetting the sentence that comes next with your essays, but I know what's in each sentence. What should I do? Well, that's the most important thing. I would just learn the trigger word for each sentence. So if you know kind of, okay, the key point I'm going to make in this second piece of analysis is to do with, individual freedom. This one was about individual freedom, or like maybe it's even more specific to the quote there. As long as you know that, then you can always come up with a sentence, and then that will trigger your memory of the rest of it. In terms of, I'm trying to think of a practical tip here for you, assuming you're doing it tomorrow. Assuming you're doing it tomorrow, Lincoln. If you were doing it tomorrow, you're worried about forgetting what comes next. You can also just pay a bit more attention to memorizing sentence starters, like the sentence start. So I used to really pay attention to how each sentence started, the first few words in a row, and I would just write those down so that I then had the start of the sentence there to trigger my memory for the rest of the sentence. But again, even if that doesn't work and you don't want to kind of just put extra attention right now into memorizing some of the starts of the sentence that will then trigger the rest of the sentence, you can also just default to a basic structure of like, the technique in the quote reveals this, and instead just remember the order of your quotes and what the quotes are, and you can kind of hopefully it'll come back to you in terms of the analysis itself. But it doesn't matter if you have to start the sentence with something different than you planned. But yeah, one of those two things I would do. If you can create an acronym, even better. If if the first word of each sentence is somewhat unique and you can memorize the letters as like a word, then that's great. Anything to help you remember how you start the sentence because you've memorized the first words, or you've created a kind of an acronym or a word that is easy to remember, like Apple. First word of the first one is A, then it's P. Then for example, something like that could help. You can use ChatGPT to help you find a way to remember the starts of the sentences. It might give you some different possibilities quite quickly. The reason why your draft should be 32 minutes if you have 45, if you're talking about paper one, is because you need to allow buffer time to answer the question. Ask anyone in this chat who did actually have the discipline to cut their essays down to 32 to 34 minutes and tried to answer the question. They'll tell you they didn't have much time left over, and maybe they still ran out of time because their short answers ran over time. And then because they were thinking about how to answer the question and adapt every sentence, they ended up finishing just on time. So 32 to 34 minutes gives you that 20% buffer to adapt throughout and think about the question. It takes the pressure off. You won't feel like you have to regurgitate. You'll be thinking more clearly because you know you've got that gap. And it's all that you need to write an essay that can get full marks. And it allows a bit of buffer time for section one if you go over. They're all the reasons why it's 32 minutes. If you're a super slow writer, you might want to push it to 34. I think I answered this one. It's good to know a couple of quotes from your Module C prescribed text, just in case you get a reflection question that does mention your prescribed text, or perhaps the Part A reference the prescribed text that you needed to like draw upon that. So it's good to have a couple of quotes. So yes, just memorize a couple of very short quotes if this is the last thing you're doing before tomorrow. The thing I'd be doing before going to bed, and again, I mean, a lot of people checking in here, and it's great to see you all, but the thing I'd do is I would wind down, get off your phones, get off everything, have a printout. If you don't have a printout, you'll have to have your laptop. But the last thing I'd be looking at with no distractions is just reading out loud to myself, focused, the essay for module A and B. So I'd look at those two, and then I would, go over module C if I had time. I would just read them out loud to myself again and again, go to sleep, let the brain do the work while you're asleep of going back over and over. Sure, in the morning you can look at things. You don't want to be too frantic right before the exam. So I would kind of stay up an extra 20 minutes to read one more time through an essay, or like the bit that you're not as confident with, and read it out loud to yourself, because then when you're asleep, there'll be extra reps done unconsciously. Dizzy Easy, this will be relatable for others as well. I only got 650 words down for my common mod essay. Do I need more words when I'm writing my other essays tomorrow? You only got 650 down, so you can't do more words. That's it. It's not like a choice. Unless you like, what are you suggesting? As a trader, you only have so much time, and you can only do 650 words, which is fine. You can still get a solid mark with a good 650 word essay. You have to be a lot more efficient, of course. Make sure you're not wasting sentences. Make sure you're not storytelling. Make sure you get straight into your analysis. You have no time to waste. You have no words to waste, especially because that is a shorter essay. But you can still do really well with a high quality 650 word essay. There's people on this chat, there's people on the live stream right now who are really fast writers, and they're going to do like an 1,100 word essay. Is it a natural advantage to do that long an essay? Of course it's a natural advantage as long as the quality is good. You got to go into way more depth, of course. But you'd be surprised. It doesn't mean they're going to do twice as well. Maybe they'll do a few marks better. You can still do super well, 650, 700 words. I knew a lot of people who were super concise writers. They answered the question directly. They didn't waste any words, 650, 700 words. Still get band, they still could kind of edge a band 6 with that. So it's obviously a disadvantage not having many words, but there's no point saying, oh, I'll do more words tomorrow. If you can't do it in the 40 minutes, allowing enough time to adapt to the question as well, so in 32 minutes, that's all you can do, and that's all good. No, to be clear here, I'm not saying aim for 800 to 850 words generally. I'm not saying that. The thing I always say is I can only give you the time reference, 32 to 34 minutes, for anyone who's been listening to me long enough, 32 to 34. If you can't write 800 words in 32 minutes to 34, if 800 words took you 40 minutes as a draft, I would not tell you to do 800 words. I would say you need to do 680 words, whatever the maths works out to get you back down to 32 to 34, so that you have time to adapt and you don't run out of time. Like, a lot of you tomorrow are going to, unfortunately, learn a hard lesson about why you need to do more preparation, to cut down your essays, to shorten and sharpen them, so that you have lots of time to spare to answer the question. It's a lesson some of you are going to learn. A lot of you are probably going to learn tomorrow. And then you might come back and say, oh, now I know what you mean. It seems silly doing 32 minutes. Why does he keep saying 32 minutes? It's a 40 minutes. And why is he saying, why isn't he saying 900 words? It's because not everyone writes at the same pace, and you need time to adapt. I'm just going to address these speed and word ones, right? Let's just get them all out of the way. I'm a really slow writer. Because of this, I tend to miss lots of my key points. Do you have any advice for that? If you're missing key points, again, that just means you tried to write more than you could. If you're a slow writer, my question to you is, well, how many words can you write in 32 to 34 minutes? 34 minutes probably for you. So Addy, if you can answer that for me, because you've actually taken 40 minutes out of your entire year, and this isn't an attack on you, but this is trying to emphasize the point for everyone. 40 minutes out of your entire HSC year for one of the most important positive ROI activities you could do. If you have taken the 40 minutes to figure out how many words of essay writing you can write in 40 minutes, and then figured out what that means you have to write in 32 to 34 minutes, if you've done that, you'll be able to tell me, oh, I'm a slow writer, so I can only write 672 words per 34 minutes. And then I'd say to you, how are you going to miss lots of key points if you have written an essay with all of your key points within the 672 word limit that you have clarified to yourself? You're obviously trying to write too much. Then you're getting into the exam and missing a lot because you didn't plan to be a slower writer, but you are a slower writer, which is fine. You can work on that over the next couple of months before the HSC to maybe speed it up by 50 to 100 words. Like, honestly, you could probably add 100 words just with a bit of writing practice and really practice your handwriting speed. But you're just trying to write more than you actually can. So for me, it's a simple scenario of just cutting down your essay so that all of your key points are within a much more compact essay that's actually realistic for your speed. So you're missing key points because you're trying to write too much. Cut your essay down. Right now, if you look at your draft, cut out a bunch of sentences that are the worst sentences of the lot. Shorten your conclusion to one sentence. Take out your link sentences if necessary. Get rid of the lowest value sentences so that you've got a shorter essay. You can cover everything plus adapt to the question. It's as simple as that. Like the idea of like managing your time management, it's just about preparing to write a shorter essay. So sitting down and timing it and knowing what you can actually do because you've tested it at least once. How likely are they to mandate a discursive for standard in trials? I never like to bet on these ones because they continue to come up with surprises. Typically, you get some kind of option if you look at the historical trends, but they have also at times specified individual text types, like an imaginative ones, right? So, how likely are they to say you have to do a discursive for standard? It's possible. It's possible. Definitely not the most likely scenario, but possible. And that's why I say you have to consider what would you do in that scenario. And it's worth just doing some, dot points or at least just some thinking now about how you would approach it so that, you're not putting off what might actually happen. And you'll have to figure it out. You either have to figure it out on the day tomorrow when you have no time to spare, or you could think about it for 10 minutes now. So that at least you have one angle to take on it and you at least know where you're going to start or what you're generally going to change to your other draft that you're intending to use. This actually isn't the worst idea. You can try writing bigger on the page or just practice writing more under time conditions. Yeah, like again, if it's like kind of too late if you've got the exam tomorrow to do more writing practice, but certainly before the HSC, as I said, that will really help add some words. And you're just going to have to make a more concerted effort if you're a slower writer to practice handwriting more so you can do it legibly faster. But writing bigger on the page, if you are a slower writer, like substantially bigger, can actually help you a little bit from an impression point of view because it makes it look like you wrote more than you did. It's not the worst idea. playing a little bit into some human biases. Like if someone writes in really little writing and it's only a couple of pages, and someone writes in really big writing and it's 5 pages versus the two, it's just an innate bias to say the one that's longer is better. Obviously, it shouldn't be like that, but with handwriting, at least, as long as they stay handwritten, that's actually not a bad trick, especially with other subjects as well. There's English, but then with other ones, if you want to seem like you're writing lots and lean into that impression, I would write a little bit bigger actually. Yeah, guys, I'm not. By the way, I should. What am I doing on this advanced thing? What I'm saying right now is for standard and advanced. I was just happened to be on that page for a while, but sorry if that was misleading. This is for everyone tomorrow, advanced and standard. I also feel like an ethical obligation to get off this soon because I'm seeing some names here who've been here for a couple of hours, and that might not be the best use of your time if you've got essays to read over and things to be fresh on tomorrow. So I'm going to jump off in a sec. As fun as it is jumping on here with all of you and taking these questions, I also don't want it to be counterproductive because you're on here when you could be doing some last minute read throughs on your work. But then again, you might just do something even less productive with your time. Just catching up in the comments. Shout outs to Hot Cocoa. Good to see you again. Enjoy the nostalgia. Hopefully, it's a good one. Yes, we're working on it. And also to the question before about me jumping on solo here, we've got obviously other people in the team. I just love doing these. But for VCE, we'll get some VCE specific experts as well to help with some of these live streams closer to the exams. So stay put. Can you memorize one reflection for Module C no matter what you write? Yeah, I would always memorize one base reflection. I don't know what you mean by no matter what you write. Do you mean you can use that reflection no matter what the question is? You can memorize a reflection to have a base, to have confidence in something. You have some core material for a reflection. It should only be a short one because the most marks that usually ever come up for a reflection is 10 marks. Typically, they're eight to 10 marks. So if you had to do a reflection, you'd definitely want to have a memorized base. It's like a mini essay, right? Like a very short 1 to 2 sentence introduction, two short body paragraphs. Each one should be on a stylistic device that you've used based on a prescribed text, and it should connect to the question and the stimulus, or just what you've been asked to do for the reflection, and then a 1 sentence conclusion. It's like a mini essay, the reflection, and it's worth memorizing, and you can adapt it to the question and keep what is relevant and replace what is not. But yes, certainly worth being familiar with a base reflection just so that you're faster on the day because you might only have 10 minutes or so to write it, especially if you went overtime with the essays. Spam in the chat. A lot of spam in the chat. Uh, who's picking on Izzy? Izzy's a legend. Let's keep it positive in here. Izzy's one of the ones who stood out in the comments. What's my final message to you guys? My final message. My final message is go to bed soon and read over the essay or the thing you're least familiar with just before you go to sleep. That's my final message. Sonia, shout out to Sonia. Thank you guys for making the time to jump on here. No, William, you guys aren't cooked. Don't worry. You'll do well because you're going to focus on answering the question. You're going to use adjectives before the key words. You're going to use some of the simple tricks. You're going to avoid just writing. Don't start writing straight away when it's pens down. Oh, sorry, when it's writing time starts and they go. You don't just start writing the first sentence because you're going to inevitably miss something. You could have done a bit better on that first sentence, which is disproportionately important for impressing the marker and showing them that you're answering the question and you've broken it down. What you do is you wait 30 seconds. You look at the key terms again and you think, how can I reword this even better? How can I expand on a couple of those words even more for even this very first sentence of my introduction? And then I'm going to use the key terms of the question, at least one of the key terms of the question in every single sentence of my introduction and in all of my topic sentences. Okay, you're going to flood your essays with the key terms of the question, and you're going to keep asking what type and filling in the gaps and forcing yourself to say something specific. That is why you guys are going to be fine. Okay, keep an eye on the clock and be disciplined with knowing when to just call it for that module. Okay, it's been 40 minutes. I need to wrap up. I need to get that one sentence conclusion done now. I've gone over. Get to the next thing. Can I reveal the hair? I'm pretty sure I have revealed the hair before. My hair is falling out, guys. If you were watching this in like 6 months' time, I'm going to be bald on here. Trust me. I'm just hanging on. I'm in that hanging on category. For any of the receding men out there, I'll be with you soon, or you'll be with me soon. Appreciate it. Need the assurance. Happy birthday, Billy! If it is your birthday, give you the benefit of the doubt on it. It's possible, but it's worth considering. As I said, the idea of getting a very specific text type, like imaginative, discursive, persuasive only. If I had to put a percentage on it, 25%, which means that's pretty significant. 1 in 4. You don't really want to bet on those. You don't want to bet against that because that's still a decent chance of being in that situation where you're forced to do it. So just consider what you would do, even just in terms of an overall plan or how you would adapt your existing draft to that. Again, 10 minutes of thought now into the possibility of getting the question that you least desire can actually save you a ton of marks if you do get a question like that. However, the odds of there being an imaginative, I mean, you could just get the option between discursive persuasive or persuasive imaginative. They could do a combination of two, three, or just give you the one. So you just need to be ready for each one, but you can still have your preferred type that you are banking on. Good to see you, Charlie. Good night, Billy. Enjoy the birthday sleep. Look at William teeing it up. I mean, I recommend Jedi. That's the one I recommend. Jedel has that marking tool which calibrates to the syllabus outcomes. We train it on real essay data based on kind of band six, band five, etc. You get like an A to E kind of level and specific feedback. So if you guys need that feedback, you can try out Jedi. You can also submit things to our team to get back to you with human feedback as well. If you're in a rush now to reduce your essays because you've been listening to what I've been saying about shortening your essays, being realistic about how much you can actually write while also factoring in time to adapt on the day and read the question and answer the question, then the three things that I would cut down first is number one the conclusion. Cut that down to just one sentence if you feel like you're way over. Okay. If you're way over, just cut the conclusion down to your one essential sentence to kind of sum it up and finish on a note of what responders are encouraged to do. What are they walking away kind of reevaluating or rethinking? So get your conclusion down to one sentence. It's the least important part, but you need to have one. Cut down the last body paragraph, starting with the link sentence. The link sentence in your last body is also not really that important. You're about to sum up things in the conclusion anyway. So it'd be the last link sentence, and then the last sentence of analysis in the last body paragraph, because these are the last things the marker's reading. They've already got an idea of the mark they're going to give you by this point. So you don't want to cut things out from the start. You never want to cut things down from the introduction unless you have to. But 3 to 4 sentence intro, I wouldn't be cutting that down anymore. I think it's just such an important part of the essay. It's the first thing they read. So other things you could cut out of the link sentences generally. If you feel like you're way over, conclusion down to one sentence, get rid of all your link sentences and get rid of your last sentence of analysis in your last body paragraph. There's already like 5-6 sentences you can just take out. There's a bunch of other things I would do to cut down essays that aren't just so kind of black and white, like get rid of that, get rid of that. I don't really like that, but because it's night before for a lot of you, that's literally what I would be doing. William, not sure exactly what you mean by that. Again, you've got to be specific with what you mean about the topic. I mean, power. Yeah, you'd have to explain to me what you're actually contemplating in that discursive. What's the tension? What are the topics what's the concern that you're considering, and put that in simple language for me. No, I'm not censoring anyone. Just looking through the chat. Uh, there's there's not a whole lot of relevant questions now. It's gotten to that point of the stream. All right, back to your discursive topic question. It's like the question is power truly inherited or does power only arise from belief? Interesting. So like do people only have power if people believe they do? Okay. Yeah, there's something there. I mean, it's still a little bit vague for my liking. Like, is power truly inherited? What do you mean by truly inherited? Is that the conventional thinking? Because like when you say is it truly, that implies that's what people would presume. Um, I don't know if power is truly inherited. Does it arise from belief? I also don't even know if it arises from belief. Hey, maybe that's what you're contemplating. What you're really contemplating is where does power come from, is how I would stipulate it. And then you could divide it into a couple of categories. Two categories is good. If that's how you want to bundle it, self belief, intrinsic or extrinsic, does it come from within or from outside of you in terms of where power comes from? Yeah, that's good. I always pose it as a question more openly, like where does power come from? And then you introduce two kind of ideas of where it could come from, and you could maybe have an extended metaphor to compare each of them, and you break down the features of them. That works. That works nicely. But again, I'd frame the question a little bit differently. Where does power come from? And then you contemplate whether it comes from within, self-belief, or it's inherited from somewhere outside of you. Yeah. All right. Are there any topics you should stay clear of within imaginative responses? Just the cliche ones. What I said before is topics, ideas. They're not as important as the style, how you're writing, which is why I gave the examples of, long sentences, short paragraphs, being playful with that to reflect what you're talking about. That's the big thing. Using extended metaphors or analogies or anecdotes at the start, depending on what you're drawing from your prescribed text. Those stylistic elements are going to be a lot more important, but you still do need to have a clear idea or concern or tension that you are exploring. So you need one tension around an idea. Like before we said, where does power come from? Does it come from self-belief or does it come from, others? And yeah, that's a tension. We don't have to frame it like a tension necessarily, but there is one that we're exploring. So you want to have a topic that has a tension. You want to avoid the super cliche ones like being a school kid, and, those school ones. To be honest, if I was just reading about someone talking about an experience in the classroom or something, and I was a teacher, I'd be not super engaged with it, but you might have done it. You might have had a really cool spin on it and done something experimental with the write-in, and that was impressive, which is cool. So it can work. But cliche ideas are going to be the ones that everyone's doing. A lot of students will just write about high school stuff. But there are even cliche ideas like technology is bad and stuff like that. But it's still a great topic. It's just where you go with it. It's just the perspective you provide on it. So. Don't shy away from a topic because it is prima facie what everyone else is doing. When you dig a little bit deeper, it's actually you might actually be able to do something quite clever with it. So it's more about the perspective. Can you do something unique? Can you write in an interesting way in terms of experimental structure? Mix up your sentence structures, sentence lengths, voice, have a really compelling voice, stream of consciousness. Lots of things you can do to stand out. Don't worry about having this super unique idea, okay? Tell everyone about life. Now, I did go through life at the start of this stream for those who have been here since the start, but there are a lot more people on right now. So, guys, life, if you're not familiar with it, is a strategy for creative, right? For the craft of writing for module C, when you guys get a stimulus, let me see if I can give you an example. Let's do an example. This is it. Now I got to sign off. This is getting ridiculous. I'm addicted to this as much as some of you are now, maybe because you're procrastinating, but it's not good for you at this point to still be on if you've been here since the start, as much as I appreciate it. Let me have a look here. If we are doing module C, craft of writing, read this bit first, but read your reflection, read both questions first before you even look at this thing. So this is a module C question. Use this extract as the stimulus for an imaginative or discursive that explores the hope that comes with anticipation. Okay, so when you're waiting for something to happen, I always like to just reword it back to myself in different words so that I know that I understand it, or I'd like to define it to myself in a way that makes sense. So hope that comes with anticipation. What is anticipation? You're waiting for something. So something hasn't happened yet. When something hasn't happened yet, that you can still always pray for a good outcome. That's what the first thing I've just done there. See that? I hope that comes with anticipation. Okay, when something hasn't happened yet, you can still like kind of pray for a good outcome, or I'm trying to not use the words there. So, okay, I've defined it to myself. How does it want me to use the stimulus? It just says use the extract as a stimulus. Look how vague that is. It doesn't even say use it as the open-in, use it as the set-in. It just says use the extract as a stimulus. That's great. That's nice and broad for you. You just need to make it obvious throughout your piece how you're actually using it. So when I read this stimulus, I'm going to be thinking about life. How do I give life to this stimulus? Because I still want to use my prepared material if I can, because I have more sophisticated material there. I want to use my draft as much as possible if it works. It will work more than you think if you're thinking about the stimulus in the right way. So life is saying, I'm going to interpret the stimulus literally. Now, I might not do it, but I'm going to consider it. Am I going to give life to it? What does a literal interpretation of this stimulus mean? How do I internalize this stimulus? Do I want this stimulus to be a reflection of my character's state of mind, internal state? It doesn't have to literally be where the character is or what they're thinking or what they're saying, but it could be what they're thinking. It could be what they're feeling. That's internalizing. That's the I in life. Then there's F for figurative. Figurative means you're taking the symbolic value of it. It's a metaphor for something. A good way to use a stimulus is to say, it felt like, and then you refer to the stimulus or some part of the stimulus. And now the marker knows you're using it figuratively because you have clearly established a simile. You're not literally using the stimulus, you're figuratively using it by introducing a simile, an extended metaphor, a motif. Have that simile or that metaphor pop up all throughout your piece. It's not enough to just refer to it once in a one-liner at the beginning of your piece. You're going to get a really bad mark if you do that. You've got to add a few sentences at a time. That's why we have the rule of threes, 3 sentences at a time as a guideline to really show the marker how you're using the stimulus. And you've got to do that at least 3 times throughout, beginning, middle, end. So what about the E? You can externalize the stimulus. Maybe the stimulus is something that another person said to your character or speaker, and they're thinking about it. Maybe it's something they heard someone say directly, okay, depending on the nature of your piece. So with this stimulus, in the middle of the night around 4 a.m., sometimes, often, but not always, a bird sings a 4-note song at intervals. It doesn't wake me up, but when I lie there, I hear it and imagine it is letting all the other birds and the rest of us know that all is well. Morning is coming. And then, again, we have to kind of reconcile that with the question here. The key thing about this question is we need to talk about how hope comes with anticipation, right? And you can interpret that very broadly, but what am I actually taking from the stimulus? It will depend what idea we have. I feel like I've got to use an example here. Let's see. What was the other example we talked about? We said where power comes from. There were some earlier ones as well that I'd like to draw from. Mod C ideas. Oh, like parental. Someone said before that I looked at for the 2024 one, so I just want to use it again for this one to show how you could adapt it. Parental expectations, right? Parental expectations. Let's say you have a piece about parental expectations. How would I first of all think about hope that comes with anticipation. Okay, well, depends if you're framing your piece from the parents' point of view or the kid's point of view. You're talking about your parents' expectations of you. Well, you can have hope that you please your parents. That's one perspective. I want to make my parents proud. That's the classic view, right? So I'm going to try and make them proud, right? Or I could have hope of doing my own thing, living my own life, and that's what I'm kind of doing. So I'm going to defy my my parents' expectations. I'm going to go against what they want and do what I want. That's one perspective, again, because I'm just relating it to attention. The other tension would be I'm going to do what my parents want me to do, and I hope that that will make them proud of me. And maybe you end up exploring that it doesn't, and you subvert that, and you say, I've explored how you can think that something good will happen, if you try to please or try to conform, but in the end it doesn't. Now, maybe you don't get that far in with a 12 mark. It's not going to be that long a response, but you just want to capture one moment of that tension of someone feeling like, hey, I hope to make my parents proud, but I also hope to live a life congruent to my aspirations and desires. So there's a tension of hope in two different directions. Great. So we've captured the idea that hope could actually be for two different things that are conflicting. Great. That's how you get attention. Now, in terms of this stimulus here, in the middle of the night, 4 a.m., a bird occasionally sings a song. It doesn't wake me up, but when I lie there, I hear it and imagine it is letting all the other birds and the rest of us know that all is well. I imagine, I'm just going to try and pick one thing here because there's a lot of different words here. A bird singing, cool, doesn't always wake you up. You lie there, you imagine it's letting all the other birds and the rest of us know that all is well, morning is coming. So there's this signal from nature, I guess. I just take the symbolic value at first because my piece with parental expectations is not literally about someone lying in bed, listening to this bird thinking that. So how do I take it literally? I take the symbolic value out of it. What's the concept? Okay. And again, we use life. Do I want to use this literally for my parental expectations piece about hope to make parents proud, hope to follow my dreams and the tension? No, I don't actually want my character, let's say in an imaginative, to be lying in bed listening to this. Yeah, possibly, but no, I'd rather not use the literal. So what's the figurative? I always jump to figurative. What's what's the symbolic value is basically figurative as well. Well, you are listening to a bird, and the bird is clearly symbolic. This bird singing is symbolic of things that kind of a sign from nature that good things are coming. It's like an omen, isn't it? I imagine it gives you this peace of mind, right? So for me, I'm thinking with the parental expectations thing, do I listen to these signs? There's a sign of nature. It's like a bird singing, and that's how you can refer to it, right? It was like a bird's call-in, a bird a bird calling to another person. I felt like this is literally how I would word parts of this response. I felt like a bird was calling. The bird was not actually calling, even though in the stimulus it is. I felt like, even if you just take one thing away from this last piece of advice before we finish, I felt like a bird was calling and that I had no choice but to follow my dreams, right? I knew that on this other side of that bird's calling was, and then this, the hope, right? The anticipation of following your dreams, the bird was calling. You feel your instinct, just connect the bird and the calling to something that makes sense with your piece. And then on the other side, however, but at the same time, the morning was still far away. There was still an uncertainty. What about my parents? What about what they expected of me? That bird was not always calling. See here, it says how the bird sometimes, often, but not always sang a note. Sometimes the bird went silent. Now, notice here, the more I've just fleshed this out, the last couple of minutes, the bird's calling is like your instinct. It's like your soul. It's like calling you to do what you want in life and defy your parents' expectations. But sometimes you don't hear the calling. The bird stopped singing. My parents' voice was louder than the birds singing, right? The shouting. I have to do this. You have to live this way. I couldn't hear the bird anymore. See where I'm going with this thing? We're good. We've got it now. Once you hit that point, you're like, bang, I got it. Parental expectations. I've linked the bird with the parents. The parents are shouting at me to do something. They're louder than the bird. I don't always hear the bird. The bird is my gut, my gut call of what I should do. But sometimes I hear the bird and it's like, hey, you should do this. Boom, boom, boom. I'm going to use it as a motif. Establish it at the beginning with a simile, and you're sorted. There we go. Nice feeling when you kind of like link it to what you already had. Notice I just took the student's example from earlier with the 2024 one, and I've just shown you exactly how you could use it with the 2023 one. It doesn't matter what stimulus. I still use the exact same premise, the exact same piece. Now, why am I still on here? Guys, we all have to go to bed. I have to get home. It's been a blast. It's been a pleasure. It's actually special doing this right around your exam time. I don't know. I'm having my own nostalgia, reliving it. Not that it was a highly stressful time. I get it. And, but it's good. It's good to help. I hope it's been helpful. Maybe it's taking your mind off things as well based on some of this. But hey, did that all make sense? I hope it did. I hope now you're thinking about life. Hey, maybe I don't have to interpret the stimulus too narrowly. Maybe I can think about it super symbolically and broadly, and I can link it to what I already wanted to talk about because now I know how to think about a stimulus. I will be with you in the exams, Habib, in spirit, like the bird, calling sometimes. Okay. Am I going to do any other streams? This is the last one I am ever doing. Of course not, right? I will be back. I'm going to just do more and more of these. I think live streams are the future. They're my future. I think I just got to be on these things, chatting with you guys more and more. And I'm not even being facetious. I'm serious. I think that's where content has gone, and that's where I actually get the most kind of satisfaction as well. Like interacting, seeing what you guys need help with. So let's go all out. Let's get on Twitch. Let's get on Kick. I don't know if I'll move those. I think I'll stay loyal to YouTube at the moment. But we'll see where the landscape takes us. But planning on doing a lot more of these in the lead up to the final exams. And if someone's watching this from a different year group, we will continue to do these more and more. I said, if we get one of those, we should get like a prize pool. If we come on these live streams and people want to donate, then we can give it out as prize money to people for certain things. Maybe, I don't know. We need to set that up. But for now, if you need help, just go subscribe to Jeddle, go subscribe to Resource, go subscribe to Jedi before your HSC if you feel like it could help. All right. Good luck, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a blast. I really do hope this has helped. And for real, this is the end for tonight. I'll see you soon. Good luck tomorrow. Let me know in the comments on one of the recent YouTube videos, maybe on this one, how you go. Everyone check back in tomorrow and then forget about the exam and move on to the next one. All the best. Hope to see you soon. Good night. Good luck. I believe in all of you. You'll do well. Answer the question. Take a moment to pause. Digest those key terms. Remember life for Module C. Remember those little tricks. Add an adjective. Add that extra expansion on the key term, and shorten that conclusion, but get it done. And check back in. Let me know what works strategy-wise for you.